Ether hacking, electricity from the void. Imagine a world in which the sky itself is an inexhaustible reservoir of power, where every cubic centimeter of emptiness pulses with hidden energy, capable of sustaining entire civilizations, without burning a single gram of coal or a single drop of oil. At the dawn of the 20th century, as humanity stood frozen on the threshold of its greatest technological sunrise, Nikola Tesla and a small circle of like-minded thinkers came remarkably close to cracking the code of reality itself, extracting energy from what the ancients called the ether. This was not mere scientific curiosity. It was an attempt to free humanity from the chains of resource scarcity, transforming the planet into a single resonant mechanism that could transmit clean power through the very fabric of the stratosphere. Wardenclyffe Tower, rising over Long Island, like the eerie skeleton of a future yet to be born, was not just an antenna, but the key to this ether hack. Tesla claimed that the Earth is a giant electrical capacitor, and that by tuning a system to its natural frequency, one could induce resonance, allowing energy to be transmitted wirelessly to any point on the globe, using the atmosphere itself as a superconductor. Researchers of the era, whose reports now sit behind top-secret classifications, described extraordinary phenomena. Light bulbs glowing in people's hands dozens of miles from the tower, air itself shimmering and thickening with static charge. This was the physics of a living universe, where emptiness was not the absence of matter, but its most concentrated form, waiting only for the right impulse to awaken. Then, in the 1920s, something happened that cannot be explained by simple economic inefficiency. The very concept of the ether was subjected to a total scientific execution. Einstein's theory of relativity, which became the new canon, elegantly pushed the ether to the margins of history, declaring it unnecessary. And although Einstein himself later acknowledged the need for some kind of medium to transmit physical properties, the wheel of oblivion had already begun to turn. As if on an unseen signal, paragraphs about dynamic space vanished from physics textbooks, while laboratories exploring zero-point energy suddenly lost funding or burned to the ground under unexplained circumstances. Why would the system take such radical measures, erasing traces of a technology that could have ended ecological catastrophe and wars over resources? The answer lies in the nature of control itself. Free and universally accessible energy is the death of any existing hierarchy. If the sky gives a spark to anyone who dares to drive a spire into it, the very notion of a paid resource evaporates, and with it, collapse empires built on monopolies over fuel. We became consumers, chained to copper wires, because the architects of reality decided that humanity could not be given the fire of the gods until it learned to be an obedient slave to the light bulb. Today, as we look at the skeletons of abandoned stations and reread Tesla's encrypted diaries, we understand this much. The ether never disappeared. It still surrounds us, unseen, unheard, hidden behind mathematical models we were instructed to accept as truth. We were made to forget that we live in an ocean of energy, forced to pay for every drop of it to those who simply seized the keys to that ocean in time. And the first step toward awakening is realizing that the progress we see is only a narrow corridor into which we were herded, its walls bricked up to seal off the doors that once led to true greatness. The voice of the abyss, infrasonic terror. The world around us is filled with sounds that shape our everyday lives. But what if the most dangerous force exists in a zone of absolute silence? Beyond the limits of human hearing, below the threshold of 16 Hz, lies the realm of infrasound. Low-frequency vibrations that do not register in the eardrums, yet resonate directly with our internal organs. Researchers who spent decades studying this phenomenon uncovered a disturbing pattern. A frequency around 7 Hz the so-called voice of the abyss, coincides with human brain alpha waves and the natural resonant frequencies of internal organs. This is not merely sound. It is a seismic key capable of turning a living being into a mass of primal, uncontrollable fear. In the 1960s, French scientist Vladimir Gavreau, while conducting experiments in a sealed laboratory, encountered something inexplicable. His staff suddenly began complaining of nausea, panic attacks, and, most disturbingly, clear visual hallucinations. In the corners of rooms, they perceived dark, anthropomorphic figures that vanished the moment they turned their heads. It was later discovered that an infrasonic generator had caused the eyeball to vibrate, producing folds and distortions in peripheral vision. But a more esoteric school of researchers claims something else entirely: that infrasound at certain frequencies thins the membrane between our world and other dimensions, allowing us to briefly glimpse entities that exist in interdimensional folds and are normally hidden from human sight. The mystery of this technology's disappearance from the civilian world is striking in its synchronicity. In the mid-1970s, projects exploring low frequencies for psychological stabilization or remote subsurface sensing were abruptly shut down. The official explanation cited unpredictable environmental effects, yet intelligence archives preserve reports of naval incidents in which entire crews descended into collective madness after hearing what was described as the hum of the earth. These are the modern Flying Dutchmen, ships found drifting with untouched food supplies, but completely empty, or with crews driven insane by the unseen presence of something that answered the call of infrasonic resonance. Why did the architects of reality place a veto on the study of these frequencies? The answer is chilling in its cynicism. Infrasound is the perfect tool of mass control. It leaves no trace. Whoever controls the voice of the abyss can manipulate the emotional state of entire cities, inducing apathy, submission, or irrational rage simply by transmitting an inaudible hum through ventilation systems or underground infrastructure. By classifying this technology, it was transformed into an invisible shepherd's whip. We assume our anxiety attacks are caused by stress or the news. But what if, at that very moment, behind the walls of your apartment or deep beneath the ground, a generator is operating at a frequency designed to make your soul contract in terror before something unseen? The voice of the abyss is a reminder that the human being is nothing more than a fragile set of biological frequencies, easily thrown out of tune. A technology that could have healed tissue and restored neural connections through deep resonance was taken from humanity and turned into an instrument of invisible terror. We live in a world where silence is no longer safe, and what we dismiss as a shadow in the corner of a room may be a very real visitor, invited into our reality by a frequency we were forbidden to study. Post-mortem technology, hibernation projects. Imagine a state in which the boundary between biological existence and final non-being thins to transparency, turning a human into an immobile vessel suspended outside time and space. In the mid-1950s, at the height of the Cold War, when science was obsessed with overcoming human fragility, experiments in deep hibernation began in closed medical centers. These experiments aimed to artificially slow metabolism to levels previously believed incompatible with the spark of life. Scientists discovered that under extreme cooling and the introduction of specific chemical cocktails, the human body could enter a state of anabiosis. The pulse slowed to a single beat every few minutes, and oxygen consumption nearly ceased. Officially, these studies were conducted for future interstellar travel and for saving the critically wounded. In reality, their true purpose lay far beyond operating rooms. Those at the origins of the hibernation projects quickly realized that a body in deep cold becomes a portal to another reality. Participants placed into a controlled state of near death, described upon awakening, experiences that could not be explained by hallucinations or cerebral hypoxia. They did not see the cliched light at the end of the tunnel. Instead, they spoke of vast, cold expanses, devoid of familiar physical laws, where time flows simultaneously in all directions. Consciousness, detached from biological sensors, began to perceive reality not through sight or hearing, but through a direct connection to the planet's informational field. Volunteers returned with maps of places absent from satellite imagery, and with knowledge of languages that had vanished thousands of years before the advent of writing. But the most terrifying aspect was not what they saw there, but how they returned to the world of the living. Psychological reports, later confiscated and destroyed, noted that after the third or fourth immersion, the subject's personality began to fragment, giving way to something else. Those who passed through hibernation acquired an empty, piercing stare. Witnesses called the look into nowhere. They lost the capacity for empathy, forgot the names of loved ones, and began to speak of humanity as a byproduct of a global process we are not meant to understand. It appeared that during anabiosis, the human soul evaporated from the body, replaced by an external consciousness that used the biological shell as an avatar to exist in our reality. This phenomenon of personality substitution became the official, though deeply classified, reason for shutting down civilian hibernation programs. By 1968, all laboratories were dismantled, and leading specialists vanished without a trace, as if they themselves had been put into a sleep from which there is no awakening. The architects of reality understood that a technology allowing consciousness to leave the body and return with forbidden data undermined the foundations of the world order. Had hibernation become accessible to everyone, the very concept of death would have ceased to function as an instrument of fear and control. A person who knows what lies beyond the threshold becomes immune to manipulation. But the system could not allow the existence of an army of the empty, people who no longer belong to this world, yet continue to act within it. The technology was erased from reality, replaced by the doctrine of irreversible brain death, so that we would continue to believe there is nothing beyond the cold except darkness. Today, any attempt to revisit anabiosis runs into insurmountable bureaucratic and ethical barriers, even as rumors persist in defense corridors of sleeping legions, units that have waited for decades in cryogenic chambers, destined one day to awaken and bring into our world knowledge from those icy voids where we are forbidden to tread. This is the tragedy of progress, halted not by technical incapacity, but because we looked eternity in the eye. And eternity blinked first, forcing us in terror to seal that door forever. T. Brown's Antiphysics. Flight beyond the laws. Imagine a world where gravity is not an unbreakable force, but merely a parameter that can be tuned, or even canceled. In the mid-20th century, when jet engines were only beginning to conquer the skies, and humanity had not yet seriously dreamed of spacecraft, one man, Thomas Townsend Brown, came dangerously close to creating a technology that literally rewrote the laws of physics. He did not build rockets or design wings. Instead, Brown developed asymmetric high-voltage capacitors, disks that, when connected to a power source, began to move without any reactive exhaust, without moving parts, simply rising into the air. It looked like magic, yet it was demonstrated in laboratories and recorded on film. The effect, later called electrogravitics, shocked everyone who encountered it. Brown's objects did not fly in the conventional sense. They seemed to drop out of Earth's gravitational web, moving silently and effortlessly, ignoring the basic principles of Newtonian mechanics. This was nothing less than manipulation of the fabric of space-time itself, a local alteration of mass or inertia that allowed an object to move in defiance of all known laws. Speakers at closed Pentagon conferences described test disks that hovered inside vacuum chambers and even produced thrust, as if pushed by an invisible force. This was not just an invention, it was a direct challenge to the entire existing physical paradigm, proof that reality is far more malleable than we are led to believe. As so often happens with technologies that stray too far from the approved path, Brown's projects, and those of his followers, were suddenly and inexplicably shut down. In the very same month, not a coincidence, but a clear directive from above, laboratories in the United States, the United Kingdom, the USSR, and even France working on similar concepts were sealed. Documentation was confiscated under top-secret classification, and scientists who had demonstrated electrogravitic effects were strongly advised to pursue more traditional research. The official explanation was dry and vague: insufficient efficiency or lack of practical application. But how could something capable of producing lift without fuel be considered inefficient? The real reason for the shutdown ran far deeper. The architects of reality understood that a technology capable of controlling gravity threatened not only oil monopolies, but the entire system of control itself. What happens to borders if anyone can cross them silently and invisibly? What happens to warfare if combat vehicles can move while ignoring resistance altogether? It is said that some of Brown's prototypes, already capable of being piloted, were sighted where they should not have been, in reports of unidentified flying objects long before UFOs entered popular culture. The system decided it was easier to label these craft alien than to admit that humanity itself had created something capable of breaking free from gravity's chains. Today, electrogravitics is discussed only by conspiracy theorists, and in official scientific circles, the subject is dismissed as pseudoscience. But what if the blueprints and equations were not destroyed, only hidden, waiting in underground bunkers owned by those who refuse to give up the key to the sky? Perhaps this technology is precisely what lies behind what we see in the heavens, and what we are shown as alien ships are in fact long forgotten, but perfected machines built from Thomas Townsend Brown's designs. We could be flying silently, without pollution, yet instead we were given roaring airplanes and eternal dependence on fuel. Because true power does not lie in invention itself, but in deciding what humanity is allowed to know and to use. The whisper of Gaia, communication through the Earth's crust. Imagine that beneath our feet there lies not a lifeless mass of stone and molten magma, but a colossal, hyper-complex, crystalline intelligence, capable of transmitting information across any distance without a single wire or radio tower. In the mid-20th century, when radio communication was still vulnerable to atmospheric interference and solar storms, a group of avant-garde scientists turned their attention downward, into the depths of the lithosphere, and discovered something that forever changed their understanding of the planet. Communication through the Earth's crust, using extremely low frequencies and the planet's natural resonant cavities, promised a system that could not be jammed, intercepted, or destroyed. Researchers found that the Earth's crust functions as a gigantic spherical resonator. Inject a signal at one point, and it echoes, amplified by the planet's natural currents, at any other point on the globe with absolute clarity. However, during the very first large-scale tests, scientists encountered a phenomenon that did not fit within classical geology. Receiving stations began detecting not only test signals, but a strange, rhythmic hum that could not be attributed to tectonic movement or human activity. These were complex, modulated data packets resembling an ultra-dense digital transmission. A disturbing hypothesis emerged. The Earth itself is an active transmitter, engaged in a continuous dialogue on frequencies we had only just learned to access. Those who heard this whisper of Gaia described it as the sensation of a vast, monstrous intelligence becoming aware of anyone who touched its informational network. This was not merely communication. It was a direct connection to the planet's nervous system. In the early 1970s, just as civilian research into lithospheric communication was nearing industrial implementation, it was abruptly placed under total secrecy. Laboratories were dismantled within weeks, and equipment was removed under armed guard by special units, taken to undisclosed locations. Officially, the method was declared inefficient due to high levels of natural noise. The reality was far darker. Researchers discovered that at certain frequencies, the Earth's whisper began to affect the operator's psyche, inducing deep trance states and transmitting images that could only be interpreted as planetary memories. The architects of reality realized that this technology granted access to a source of knowledge that could not be censored. If anyone could listen to the Earth, it would become impossible to hide the true history of civilization or manipulate mass consciousness, because the planet itself retains the record of every event that has ever occurred upon it. Today, access to the study of the Earth's whisper is fully monopolized by classified military agencies. While we rely on a fragile, controllable internet, installations deep underground operate systems that either consult the planet or use it as a weapon of psychological influence. Civilian research in this field is taboo, and any enthusiasts attempting to build homemade, extremely low-frequency receivers quickly attract the attention of security services. We have been relegated to the role of surface dwellers, forbidden to look deeper, so that we do not grasp a simple truth. The world beneath our feet is alive. It remembers everything, and it is constantly speaking to us. But its voice is deliberately drowned out by the white noise of modern civilization. The whisper of Gaia continues to resonate in the depths, waiting for the moment when humanity finds the courage to take off its headphones and listen once again to the rhythm of its own home, a rhythm that was so treacherously taken from us. Living machines, the death of analog computers. Imagine that beneath our feet lies not a lifeless mass of stone and molten magma, but a colossal, hyper-complex, crystalline intelligence, capable of transmitting information across any distance without a single wire or radio tower. In the mid-20th century, when radio communication still suffered from atmospheric interference and solar storms, a group of avant-garde scientists turned their attention downward into the depths of the lithosphere and discovered something that forever changed their understanding of the planet. Communication through the Earth's crust, using extremely low frequencies and the planet's natural resonant cavities, promised a system that could not be jammed, intercepted, or destroyed. Researchers found that the Earth's crust functions as a gigantic spherical resonator. Inject a signal at one point, and it echoes, amplified by the planet's natural currents, at any other point on the globe with absolute clarity. However, during the very first large-scale tests, scientists encountered a phenomenon that did not fit within the framework of classical geology. Receiving stations began detecting not only test signals, but a strange rhythmic hum that could not be attributed to tectonic shifts or human activity. These were complex, modulated data packets, resembling an ultra-dense digital transmission. A disturbing hypothesis emerged. The Earth itself is an active transmitter, engaged in a continuous dialogue on frequencies we had only just learned to perceive. Those who heard this whisper of Gaia described it as the sensation of a vast, monstrous intelligence becoming aware of anyone who touched its informational network. This was not merely communication. It was a direct connection to the planet's nervous system. In the early 1970s, just as civilian projects studying lithospheric communication were nearing industrial deployment, they were abruptly placed under total secrecy. Laboratories were dismantled within weeks, and equipment was removed and transported to unknown locations under armed guard by special units. Officially, the method was declared inefficient due to high levels of natural noise. The reality was far darker. Researchers discovered that at certain frequencies, the Earth's whisper began to affect operators' mental states, inducing deep trances and transmitting images that could only be interpreted as planetary memories. The architects of reality realized that this technology granted humanity access to a source of knowledge that could not be censored. If everyone could listen to the Earth, hiding the true history of civilization or manipulating mass consciousness would become impossible, because the planet itself retains the truth of every event that has ever occurred upon it. Today, access to the study of the Earth's whisper is fully monopolized by secret military agencies. While we rely on a fragile, controllable internet, installations deep underground operate systems that either consult the planet or use it as a weapon of psychological influence. Civilian research in this field is taboo, and any enthusiasts attempting to build homemade, extremely low-frequency receivers quickly attract the attention of security services. We have been assigned the role of surface dwellers, forbidden to look deeper, so that we do not grasp a simple truth. The world beneath our feet is alive. It remembers everything, and it is constantly speaking to us. But its voice is deliberately drowned out by the white noise of modern civilization. The whisper of Gaia continues to resonate in the depths, waiting for the moment when humanity finds the courage to take off its headphones and listen once again to the rhythm of its own home, so treacherously taken from us. The Lazarus Code, phantom regeneration. Imagine a world in which the loss of a limb or the failure of a vital organ is no longer a sentence, and healing no longer resembles a painful struggle for survival, but a natural renewal, like the growth of hair or fingernails. In the middle of the last century, a group of physicists and biologists working at the intersection of electrodynamics and morphogenesis stumbled upon a fundamental secret of our biology, later called the Lazarus Code. Researchers discovered that every living organism possesses an invisible energetic framework, an etheric double, that serves as the blueprint for physical matter. This framework contains the information of bodily wholeness, and even when a part of the body is lost, its energetic imprint remains in place, pulsing as phantom pain. These pains are not a mistake of the brain, but a desperate signal from the system that symmetry has been broken. Regeneration technology aimed to use weak electrical currents of specific frequencies and modulated magnetic fields to make the body's cells remember this blueprint and begin filling the void according to the original matrix. In closed experiments, whose results today sound like the plot of a science fiction film, scientists succeeded in triggering complete limb regeneration in mammals, creatures that, according to official biology, are incapable of such renewal. By stimulating ion channels, they turned ordinary cells directly at the injury site into pluripotent stem cells, forcing them to rebuild bones, nerves, and muscles in perfect order. This was not a miracle. It was the use of a natural resonance between matter and its etheric blueprint. Test subjects described strange, tingling sensations and a cold glow in the wounded area, after which tissues began to grow at rates tens of times faster than normal healing. It seemed humanity was standing on the threshold of an era of biological immortality, where any injury was merely a temporary inconvenience, and aging itself could be reversed by simply refreshing cells using the reference template. However, by the mid-1970s, the Lazarus Code was suddenly declared a dangerous hoax, and all equipment used for bioresonant regeneration was confiscated and destroyed. Technologies of restoration were replaced by technologies of substitution, chemical therapies, transplantation, and an endless market of prosthetics. The reason for this forced oblivion lies in the very structure of the global economy. A healthy, self-regenerating humanity is a nightmare for pharmaceutical giants and insurance corporations. If a person could regrow a new liver or heart using a simple home device, an industry worth trillions of dollars would instantly collapse. The architects of reality understood that knowledge of the etheric blueprint makes humans too independent of systems that distribute drugs and medical services. We were taught to believe in our fragility, that we are merely collections of protein parts that inevitably wear out and require costly replacement. Today, official medicine acknowledges only a small fraction of these discoveries, rebranding them as physiotherapy and deliberately reducing the power and precision of the methods to prevent a true breakthrough. The real frequencies of the Lazarus Code are now used only in closed clinics for the global elite, allowing them to extend life and preserve health through methods declared pseudoscience for everyone else. We live with phantom pain for the lost potential of our own bodies, unaware that the key to healing was always within us, in that invisible glow surrounding every one of our cells. We were convinced that death and disease are the natural order of things, while a technology capable of turning us into beings of light, over whom time and entropy hold no power, was locked away behind 7 seals, the symphony of creation, acoustic engines. Imagine an engineering solution with not a single drop of burned fuel, not a single piston, no metal grinding against metal, where the immense work of moving matter is performed by invisible waves of compressed air and void. At the heart of the symphony of creation lies an ancient, nearly forgotten principle of acoustic levitation and resonant propulsion, rediscovered in the mid-20th century by enthusiasts studying the megalithic structures of the past. Researchers realized that sound is not merely a carrier of information, but an extraordinarily powerful mechanical tool, one capable, under certain conditions, of manipulating gravitational interaction itself. By creating standing waves in a confined space or tuning vibration frequencies to the natural resonance of a material, multi-ton blocks or machine components could be made to behave as if they had lost weight, becoming pliable and obedient to the slightest movement of air. This was a technology of harmony, where energy was drawn not from the destruction of chemical bonds, but from resonance with the rhythms of matter itself. Inside closed laboratories where prototypes of acoustic engines were tested, the atmosphere was uncanny. Massive installations operated almost silently, emitting only a faint, crystalline tone reminiscent of Tibetan singing bowls. These engines did not heat up, did not emit toxic gases, and displayed efficiencies that left classical thermodynamicists stunned. Using acoustic lenses and phased emitters, engineers created zones of acoustic vacuum in which objects could move along any trajectory at astonishing speed. Rumors circulated that one such engine, briefly run at full power in an industrial district, accidentally entered resonance with the foundation of an old building, and before witnesses' eyes, the structure began to lose its solidity, becoming semi-transparent, as if dissolving into space. It was direct proof that sound could alter the structure of reality itself, breaking the familiar bonds between atoms. That same staggering power is precisely why acoustic engines were declared the most dangerous technology of the century and erased from all public records. The architects of reality understood that control over resonance grants power not only over creation, but over absolute destruction. Anyone who knows an object's frequency can annihilate it at the press of a button, reducing fortresses or skyscrapers to dust. Even more terrifying for the system was the economic implication. An acoustic engine is effectively eternal. It requires no complex service infrastructure and no refueling. It was a technology of freedom, capable of building cities and moving cargo in near silence without dependence on fossil fuel logistics. By 1980, all patents in this field had been bought up through shell companies and frozen indefinitely, while the scientists behind the symphony of creation were reassigned to projects developing acoustic weapons for crowd control, not for building a new world. Today, we are left with primitive ultrasonic cleaners and speakers, conditioned to believe that sound is nothing more than entertainment. The true magic of acoustics, once used by the ancients to raise pyramids and by 20th century scientists to fly in silence, is hidden behind the walls of military research institutes, where it serves to create invisible barriers and dismantle human consciousness. We have been forced to live amid roaring internal combustion engines and shrieking turbines so that we never hear the one pure note capable of freeing the human spirit from gravity's chains. We forgot that the universe is, first and foremost, vibration, and whoever controls the melody controls matter itself. Yet in the silence of abandoned temples and the deep hum of ancient caves, echoes of that great symphony still linger, waiting for the moment when humanity learns, once again, not just to listen, but to resonate in unison with life itself, the eternal engine of chaos, energy cycles. Imagine a machine that violates the most sacred taboo of modern thermodynamics, the law of conservation of energy, by claiming that infinitely more power can be extracted from the void than is required to start the system. In the depths of secret 20th century laboratories, far from the eyes of the academic world, so-called eternal engines of chaos were created, devices operating on the principle of zero-point energy cycles. Their creators began with the premise that the vacuum is not absolute nothingness, but a boiling ocean of invisible energy, a colossal field of quantum fluctuations waiting to be channeled into useful work. These systems used the Casimir effect, magnetic resonance, or vortex plasma flows to create a puncture in the fabric of reality, through which an inexhaustible stream of pure power began to seep into our world. It was a technology that drew energy from the chaos of the universe itself, transforming entropy into an infinite resource. Witnesses present at closed demonstrations of such prototypes described devices that, once activated, began generating enough electricity to power an entire city while consuming less energy than an ordinary light bulb. The machines operated in a self-sustaining mode, forming a stable energy torus, an autonomous system that required no external input and produced no waste heat, as if it were drawing power from another dimension, where friction and wear have no authority. Engineers involved in these developments often mentioned non-linear effects. Time appeared to slow around operating generators, and space itself seemed to bend slightly, producing optical distortions. It felt as though the eternal engine of chaos was not merely a power source, but a living organ of the universe, pulsing in rhythm with infinity. Yet the fate of the inventors proved even more terrifying than the technology itself. The moment a device demonstrated sustained over-unity operation, its creator vanished. These were not ordinary dismissals or silencing. Entire biographies were erased from state archives, patents were annulled under the pretext of national security, and laboratories were subjected to systematic cleanups that left not a single screw behind. The architects of reality understood that a technology granting humanity free and infinite energy would instantly destroy the foundation of the modern world, the concept of scarcity. If energy costs nothing, money, power, and the social hierarchy built on resource control lose all meaning. We were taught to believe in the inevitability of an energy crisis so that we would continue paying tribute to those who monopolized the right to light and heat. Today, zero-point energy cycles are officially declared impossible, and anyone claiming success in this field is immediately ridiculed and pushed to the margins. We continue burning oil and gas, choking on emissions, and fighting over territory, while the keys to the vacuum's eternal engine sit locked in corporate vaults, used exclusively for private purposes, such as powering autonomous facilities, whose very existence we are forbidden to know. We live in an artificially constructed world of shortage, despite being surrounded by an ocean of energy capable of turning Earth into a paradise within years. The eternal engine of chaos was erased from reality, not because it failed, but because it worked too well, threatening to transform obedient consumers into free creators with nothing left to buy from their masters. The neuroscope, seeing the aura. Imagine a device capable of looking beyond the visible spectrum of matter, revealing not merely the symptoms of disease, but the very origins of illness within the human energy cocoon. At the end of the last century, when official medicine had fully committed to treating consequences rather than causes, a group of dissident scientists completed work on the neuroscope, an instrument that combined quantum optics with bioelectrodynamics. This was not an ordinary scanner. The neuroscope visualized the electromagnetic glow surrounding the human body, what ancient traditions called the aura. Yet this had nothing to do with mysticism. The device detected ultra-subtle high-frequency fields that shape our biological reality. It made it possible to see pathologies, depressive states, and even traces of external psychotronic influence on the mind years before they manifested in the physical body as tumors or psychiatric disorders. During testing, neuroscope operators discovered something that sent shockwaves through government circles. The human glow was not static. It was a dynamic informational network that encoded not only present illnesses, but also indentations in destiny, imprints of past trauma, and even vectors of future events. Scientists realized that the physical body is merely a projection of a far more complex structure, and that by acting on this glow with special corrective lenses built into the neuroscope, physical ailments resolved on their own, as if wrinkles were being smoothed out of fabric. It was a key to perfect health, and more importantly, to mental freedom. The device clearly revealed parasitic connections, energetic cords through which systems of mass control siphon vital energy from the population, keeping people in a state of constant fatigue and submission. The seizure of neuroscopes from private laboratories and clinics in the early 2000s resembled a military operation more than a bureaucratic procedure. Masked raid teams stormed institutes, confiscating not only the devices, but all observational records, while hard drives were physically destroyed. The official explanation claimed the instruments were ineffective and misleading to patients. But then, why was the description of the neuroscope's sensor technology classified for 75 years? The answer is simple. The architects of reality could not allow the emergence of a tool that makes the invisible visible. Anyone who can see an aura will immediately understand which politicians are empty shells and which spiritual leaders are in fact broadcasting darkness. The neuroscope gave people the ability to see the chains placed upon them, and that is the first step toward breaking them. Today we are left only with primitive thermal cameras and MRI machines that see nothing but flesh and bone, completely ignoring spirit and energy. The true neuroscope is now the exclusive prerogative of those at the top of the food chain. With it, they screen personnel, identify potential rebels, and extend their own longevity by correcting defects in their fields before they become fatal. We live in a blind world, convinced that we are nothing more than biological machines devoid of radiance or purpose. The neuroscope was erased from reality so that we would never learn how magnificent our true nature is, or how easily we could cast off the yoke of those who fear our light. It was the last bastion defending the human soul, and its fall marked the beginning of an era of total transparency for them and absolute darkness for us.